Story 1. You should know that Reddit does not understand rural America. If your mental image of rural America comes from Reddit and similar social media, you will be quite pleasantly surprised by the people here and the lives they lead. Story 2. The number of misconceptions non-Americans have about the United States is large. However, to be fair, Americans have just as many misconceptions about other countries. I would not even know where to start. Perhaps the idea that you cannot leave the house to go to the supermarket without getting shot. Story 3. Not necessarily knowing more, but understanding that when we say they're from the South or the North, we are not dividing the country in half. Americans refer to the Civil War for this division. Almost the entire southeast region of the country is the South, and the states from Maine to Virginia are the North. The middle northern part of the country is the Midwest because it is in the middle and west of the North. No, California, Arizona, and New Mexico are not the South. Some people in Texas do not consider themselves part of the South either. I am from South Texas, and my mom does not consider us part of the South. But if you are from the Panhandle, then yes, you are part of the South. You can ask people from those bordering states what region they consider themselves a part of. I live in Spain as an English teacher, and I had never thought this was something I needed to explain or even think about until my students made remarks about Southern California being the South. I have also explained this concept to other people who have never been to the United States while traveling around Europe. Story 4. Just how big America is. The media portrays big events that happen here, even if they really impact a small portion of the population. Based on what my friends from other countries have said, to some it looks like the whole country is in literal shambles, even though most of the population is just living life pretty normally. To add to that, many non-Americans think Americans are not well-traveled. But again, it is a lot easier to travel within countries the size of our states than it is to travel out of this country specifically. Regarding comments about Australia, fair point. I was not really thinking about Australia in my commentary, more about Europe where the time travel grants more country access than an average American would achieve in the same amount of time. For example, Europe is roughly 2,400 miles wide, while the United States is roughly 2,800 miles wide, not including Hawaii or Alaska. So my thinking is this: it takes me 24 hours to drive to my hometown, not even completely across the country. How many countries could I pass through driving the same distance in a place like Europe? Story 5. Most of us are easygoing, adventurous people. I recently went to Kenya, and everyone was surprised that I ate their food. Story 6. Most of us live relatively comfortable lives, maybe not doing exactly what we want, but comfortable enough to not want to jeopardize the lives we have built. Story 7. The internet is not a good reflection of the United States, and most stereotypes propagated online are not true. Story 8. We have high-quality cheese as well. We do not only have American cheese. American cheese originated from Switzerland. I will also add chocolate because, for some reason, non-Americans think we only have Hershey's. All high-quality, non-processed products can be found even in Walmart. Story 9. Ethnicity really matters here. I know it sometimes bothers people from other countries to hear Italian-American or Chinese-American all the time, and that we are not just collectively Americans. Many families have only been in this country for a relatively short time and do not share a culture with their neighbors the way people do in other countries. Story 10. Bison do not want to be petted. America is large, really large. Do not fly into Seattle and expect to see Mount Rainier, Olympic National Park, and Yellowstone National Park in 1 week. This is not Denmark. The different regions of the country are culturally diverse. Someone in Alabama might react negatively if you wear a sports team hat from a place they dislike. Story 11. For the most part, I don't mind answering questions or explaining things for people who live outside the United States, but I do wish it was more intuitive to folks in other places, especially Europe, that it's more comparable to their experience to think of the United States as 50 different countries. Yes, we have federal laws, national leaders, nationwide social movements, and interstate infrastructure. But we are huge. The entire continent of Europe is only slightly larger than the United States, and the United States is larger if you exclude the European portion of Russia. If you are European and have never traveled outside Europe, you are not more well-traveled, at least in geographic terms, than someone who has been to several states but hasn't left the United States. States have pockets of ethnic and cultural groups like countries do. Areas in cities or counties where English is not most people's first language or where the everyday lifestyle may be very different. There are different kinds of these, all with a very different cultural feel. Remote rural immigrant communities, separatist religious groups, and Native American reservations are three examples. Media has played a part in homogenizing us culturally, but there is still a lot of local and regional variation in basically every aspect of life. We have complex regional cultural differences that even most Americans do not bother to try to understand unless they need to for their jobs or relocate for work or a relationship. My partner is a West Coast resident who moved to the South to be with me. One thing he told me after he had been here 6 months is that there were a lot of things he thought were individual personality quirks of mine that he now realizes are culturally Southern traits. He experienced genuine culture shock moving from a large West Coast city to a Southern city of under 500,000. For example, he thinks we are all nosy because we ask each other questions about our lives as small talk. Story 12. Most of our news consists of actual lies. 90% of headlines that reach overseas are fabricated stories designed to perpetuate a very dangerous narrative. Story 13. Tipping. Yes, it is strange, and we can debate all day about whether it is good or bad. However, when you are here and you do not tip, you are hurting the person who has been serving you. Just do it when you are here. It does not have to make sense. It is part of our culture. Story 14. We love imperial measurements in part because the rest of the world thinks it is insane. Many of us are thoroughly familiar with the metric system. We just choose to use imperial. Story 15. I wish non-Americans were more aware of the bigotry in their own countries, because with a few exceptions, it is a problem almost everywhere. Yes, we do have problems with it in the United States, but it would not be part of the national conversation if we were not aware of it, and that is at least a start. I see some discussion about it in a few places. The United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia all come to mind, but I see many more people from other places constantly discussing the racial slur and asking about that than I ever see saying, "This problem in my country is serious and we need to start talking about it because we cannot address anything if we will not even acknowledge it is a problem here too." Story 16. America is not a monolith. It has multiple climates, cultures, religions, languages, and ethnicities. Even Americans who move within the United States experience culture shock. I grew up in the South and moved a few states away. It felt like moving to a different country. The culture, religion, ethnicities, and food were all different. It took a long time to adjust. I have also lived abroad in Japan, so I understand what it is like. You would never say, "All Europeans do this." Yet I constantly hear, "Americans do this," or "act like this," or "think like this." It is really aggravating and very ignorant. Story 17. I don't know if this is common among all of Europe or just European Xbox players, but one thing I keep running into is people who seem to believe that every house in the United States has at least 3 or 4 guns. Now, you are far more likely to meet someone who has never held one in their life than someone walking around with a light Grand Theft Auto arsenal in their car. Besides, if this were Grand Theft Auto, where's all the cool stuff like real-life Mach 5 cars landing in people's pools and the ability for the average person to call in an orbital strike on someone they are angry with for $20? Story 18. Depictions in the media and news are not going to give an accurate picture of our lives, just like depictions of any country. It is unconstitutional to teach religion in schools due to the First Amendment, but this surprises people when I tell them. Story 19. Most of the overly opinionated people you usually see in videos that seem to represent us overall are a joke, and most of us dislike them more than you can imagine. Story 20. The vast majority of us are not hardcore political enthusiasts. We get along with everyone around us regardless of their views. A small percentage of the population is making all that noise. Story 21. The country is great and the people are friendly. You are not going to get shot here. Most people do not follow politics very closely. Things are not as bad as the media would have you believe. Story 22. You really dislike us, and it is exhausting and annoying to interact with you. It is not appropriate to immediately bring up gun violence, obesity, poverty, and so on when I am just trying to enjoy a beer. I work for a very popular global Swedish company and have had the pleasure of traveling throughout Europe. Beforehand, I did not have an opinion of Europeans. I was interested in visiting and excited to experience different cultures, cuisines, architecture, and ways of life. But now, to be honest, I dread having to go and do not bother leaving Stockholm. Our values and work ethic are very different. There is a great gap between us in what we consider polite and appropriate. We have been told there are shared values, but that could not be further from the truth. In my opinion, this is why Americans have a reputation with Europeans for being rude. You most likely offended us to the point that we had enough and were rude in return. Whether or not you were being intentionally difficult, I would say it is 50-50. You are also 9 times out of 10 completely wrong about most of your views on America and are just repeating stereotypes and misinformation you have seen online. I really wish we could be friends though. Story 23. Overall, American English accents do not sound like a cowboy's. This is mainly true in the southern and southwestern states only, and not everyone there sounds like a cowboy or cowgirl. Story 24. America is similar to Europe in that it has many cultures spread across the continent. The South is very different from the Northeast. The Pacific Northwest is very different from Texas. There are at least 8 different regions that could be their own countries, and those would still cover massive amounts of space. Story 25. We are the greatest country in the world for capitalism and innovation, and one of the worst countries in the world for government that works for people. Do not come here expecting an easy life. It is a jungle. Story 26. Not all of us are wealthy or have money or were raised with money. There are people here skipping meals and who do not have access to running or safe water. Please stop confusing Black culture with popular mainstream American culture as well. Story 27. That we do not get shot at just walking out the door, or are yelling at each other all the time, or that we are unintelligent. Unlike what the media would like to portray, politics do not run every aspect of our lives, and we are very friendly to each other. Story 28. We do not agree with 95% of what politicians do either. Please do not hate us because of the glorified Cheeto Puff. Story 29. Our states are the size of entire countries. Europeans often act as if Americans have never left home. But the reality is you can pass through 3 countries in 5 hours. I could barely get through Alabama in that time. Driving from Milwaukee to Chicago to Nashville to Orlando is like visiting completely different parts of the world. Dialect changes, cuisine changes, architecture changes, climate changes, traffic lights are different. For God's sake, being poor in Louisville and being poor in New Orleans are 2 very different experiences. Even the English language varies widely. People in Louisiana say, "True dat," and people in California say, "For sure." Coke, soda, pop, it's all the same drink. We have 30 different cultures between the 2 oceans. The only things those cities have in common are McDonald's and Taco Bell. Story 30. We do not all have guns, and most of us did not vote for Donald Trump. He only won because of the outdated Electoral College, which was originally designed to dehumanize Black people by counting them as only 3/5 of a person more than 150 years ago. Story 31. Americans are known for being talkative and friendly. Around the world, some cultures are more reserved, while others are more open. I wish the more closed-off peoples of the world understood and shared with us the joy that comes from gregariousness. Story 32. We think and care less about you than you do about us. Also, using the terms school shooting and poor healthcare every time you disagree with something an American says online is not impressive. You do not care when American children are dying to protect you and your country because you are too afraid or unwilling to fight for yourselves. You do not reject the billions of American taxpayer dollars that could be used for our healthcare but are given for the defense of your continent. You have the freedom to look down on Americans largely because Americans fought, died, and paid for that freedom. We know we have many problems here, but you are not as superior to us as you believe. Story 33. To the Europeans, none of us think we are Irish or Italian. You don't understand an entire country populated almost exclusively by immigrants, and you are deeply threatened and insecure about it because it requires reflecting on the fact that the modern world has been shaped by European imperialism and colonialism. While Americans do not do a great job addressing our past, with the mild exception of Germany, Europeans are generally in denial, a ridiculous group of human beings once again in the process of getting us all killed. America is their concern as much as it is ours. In the same way, Israel is their concern as much as it is a Jewish concern. Europeans are the worst. Oh, but our culture. So what? You are arrogant and just as bad as any American, but you cannot admit that because this would require reflection and accountability that your average very white and extremely racist citizen cannot understand, and your ruling class, which is not former royalty or similar, does not care. Edit. I think Americans and the French have the most in common attitude-wise, which is why we clash significantly and make fun of each other a lot. This is a tangential thought from a French American. Story 34. How annoying it is to have multiple posts a day asking the same question. Seriously, are you all the same engagement robot? Story 35. We loathe the person referred to as the Cheeto in a wig. It disgusts us that our global representation is one of megalomania. Story 36. We care and no less than you already think we do about politics and history. It is really sad how little people care about their own lives and fail to connect the dots between politics and their everyday lives. No one knows or cares to know why their food is safe, how their water gets to their tap, or how our tax system works. Story 37. I think truly understanding pay and the cost of living would help many people. I chat with people across the globe, and one of my chat buddies constantly tells me how affordable America is. He sends me links to condos and houses and claims I could surely afford them. I make $46,000 in a full-time job plus a second job and live in a high cost of living area. He makes the same as a grocery store clerk, has no degree, and still lives with his mom. He doesn't understand federal minimum wage or taxes. He doesn't realize that even with a degree, you can't just stand in the middle of the street and shout, "I need $80,000 a year," and expect an employer, or even multiple employers, to rush to offer you a job. It's easy to quote financial advice from Dave Ramsey to others when you aren't even paying rent to your mom. I want to emphasize that I am aware of how lucky I am to have been born where I am. I have talked to people making $300 a month, and that is their norm. So, of course, to them I sound rich. But it would be a culture shock for them to realize that my monthly income does not even allow me to apply to live in a regular apartment. I am restricted to low-income apartments. Sure, I suppose that is still better than some other situations, but it is not the lap of luxury by any means. I wish people had a more balanced view of what affordability means. Story 38. Mexico is in North America. Most Americans do not have a Los Angeles accent. Arizona is not a southern state, but North Carolina is. Not all Southerners have a strong accent. Air conditioning is great. We have white people too. I am not secretly Dutch. Story 39. The Constitution and all the articles therein. The Bill of Rights. The difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic. Story 40. It's not just that a visit to the hospital for a routine procedure can cost over $10,000. It's also the dysfunctional bureaucracy of our healthcare system. That amount is often split among multiple bills. One from the doctor, one from the hospital, one from the associate hospital, one from the lab technician, and sometimes errors occur in the billing process which may be intentional. I spend a day or two per year just tracking medical expenses for my family. None of us have diabetes or similar conditions. That's where the real horror stories begin. Story 41. Just because the portion served may be large does not mean you have to eat everything. Takeout containers are acceptable, and you can have more meals for the price of one if you control yourself. Story 42. It is actually really nice living here. People who complain that the United States is a third world country are mentally ill. Story 43. What is the food actually like in America? I have heard that the chocolate is awful and the portion sizes are enormous. I have never visited, but it is definitely a bucket list destination for me. Story 44. They will not actually fight for their freedom and rights. As a whole, America is much more overweight and lethargic than it appears from the outside. People here do not realize it themselves, of course. A European protest is considered a riot here, and an African protest is outright anarchy here. Here, it is about who made the snarkiest sign and getting attention on social media for it. Nothing changes, and everyone goes home acting like something was accomplished. You will not see people storming the Congress for workers' rights. Unless it is for Russian propaganda, then either political side might ignite something on fire. People here are generally very susceptible to online propaganda. Story 45, we are not all right-wing idiots. It is just that those supporters of former President Donald Trump are the loudest because they are insecure. Most of us just want to live and let live and do not care what people are doing in their personal lives. Story 46. Cryptocurrency is a threat to democracy everywhere, and it has been effectively used to undermine American democracy. It could have been used for good, but it was taken over by corrupt elites early on, who are aggressively restructuring global freedoms and building new barriers to freedom. Cryptocurrency is a threat to more than national sovereignty. It has eroded checks and balances, and it is the people who now suffer. I do not even know what America is anymore, but I can see that cryptocurrency made all the change possible. Story 47. We are not a very conservative country as much as we are a country whose constitution gives outsized power to very conservative areas, and we cannot change that without discarding the entire constitution, since changing the constitution requires those very conservative areas to agree. For example, Wyoming, with 500,000 people, has as much power in the Senate as California, with 40 million people. Thus, rural areas have disproportionate voting power. Also, to the extent that we are conservative, it is very hard to get people to agree on social services, such as nationalized healthcare, in a country that is racially diverse, because it is easy to use the scare tactic that other groups will use up all the services. Everywhere in the world, mass immigration pushes countries to become more conservative, and the United States has had that from the start. Our diversity is our strength because it keeps our culture dynamic, but it is also why politics play out the way they do. Story 48. Only half of the country supports abortion on demand. The other half believes the lives of all babies matter. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.